Hello everyone, this is Earth Archives. Do you know about the caste system? Do you know why India has such a strict social class system? Even though there is no untouchability system in Japan now, the influence is still there today. Before the show starts, please help subscribe, like and turn on the little bell. This will help the Earth Archives grow. The show starts. In the quiet villages and bustling cities of South Asia, a system exists that has shaped lives for millennia. It's a system that, though often invisible to the casual observer, dictates the fate of millions. This is the caste system, a complex web of social hierarchy that has been both a source of identity and an instrument of oppression. To understand the caste system is to delve into a story as old as civilization itself, a story of division, power, and the long struggle for equality. The origins of caste. The origins of the caste system are shrouded in the mists of ancient history, but its roots can be traced back to the early Vedic period in India, around 1500 BCE. It was during this time that the Aryans, a group of nomadic people, migrated into the Indian subcontinent. The Aryans brought with them a social structure that would evolve into the caste system, known in Sanskrit as Varna, meaning color or type. The early Vedic society was divided into four primary Varnas: the Brahmins, priests and scholars; the Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers; the Vaishyas, traders and agriculturalists; and the Shudras, laborers and servants. This division was initially based on occupation and the roles that individuals played within society. However, over time, these divisions became rigid, transforming from a functional classification into a hereditary system of social stratification. The rise of hierarchy. As the Vedic period gave way to the later periods of Indian history, the caste system became increasingly complex and hierarchical. The four main Varnas began to split into countless subcastes or yatis, each with its own specific role within society. These yatis were not only occupational groups, but also tightly knit communities with their own customs, traditions and rules. The caste system was codified in the Manusmriti, an ancient legal text that laid down the laws governing Hindu society. According to the Manusmriti, the caste into which one was born determined not only one's occupation, but also one's social status, duties, and even moral obligations. The Brahmins, being the highest caste, were seen as the most pure and were responsible for performing religious rituals. The Shudras, on the other hand, were considered impure and were relegated to menial labor and servitude. The untouchables. Perhaps the most tragic and oppressive aspect of the caste system was the creation of a group that existed outside of the Varna system altogether, the untouchables, later known as Dalits. These individuals were considered so impure that they were deemed untouchable by those in the higher castes. They were forced to live on the outskirts of society, performing the most demeaning and hazardous jobs, such as cleaning latrines, disposing of dead animals, and handling corpses. The treatment of the untouchables was not just a matter of social exclusion, but one of systemic violence and dehumanization. They were barred from entering temples, using the same wells as higher castes, or even allowing their shadow to fall on a Brahmin. The caste system, in its most extreme form, was not just a hierarchy of privilege, but a mechanism of oppression that denied millions of people their basic human dignity. The legacy of discrimination. As India moved through its long history of kingdoms, empires, and colonial rule, the caste system persisted, adapting to the changing social and political landscape but never losing its grip on society. The arrival of the British in the 18th century brought new challenges and opportunities for those within the caste hierarchy. The British, recognizing the power of the caste system as a means of social control, often reinforced caste divisions in their governance of India. The British colonial administration categorized the Indian population according to caste for administrative purposes, inadvertently solidifying these divisions. However, colonial rule also exposed Indians to new ideas of equality and justice, particularly through the influence of Western education and the rise of Indian reform movements. The struggle for equality. The late 19th and early 20th centuries witnessed the emergence of reformers and leaders who challenged the caste system and its inherent discrimination. One of the most significant figures in this movement was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a Dalit who rose to prominence as a scholar, lawyer, and political leader. Ambedkar's life story is one of extraordinary resilience and determination as he fought against the caste-based discrimination that had plagued him since birth. Ambedkar argued that the caste system was not just a social problem, but a fundamental violation of human rights. He dedicated his life to the upliftment of Dalits, advocating for their education, economic empowerment, and political representation. Ambedkar's efforts culminated in his role as the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, which enshrined the principles of equality and justice and outlawed discrimination on the basis of caste. Caste in modern India. Despite the constitutional ban on caste-based discrimination, the caste system continues to exert a powerful influence on Indian society. In rural areas particularly, caste-based segregation and discrimination remain deeply entrenched. Dalits and other lower caste communities often face violence, social exclusion, and economic marginalization. In urban areas, the situation is more complex. While caste-based discrimination is less overt, it still manifests in subtler forms, such as in employment, education, and marriage. Caste-based identities continue to play a significant role in political and social life, with caste-based political parties and vote banks being a major feature of Indian democracy. The global echo. The caste system, while most prominently associated with India, has echoes in other parts of the world as well. In countries with significant Indian diasporas, such as Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, caste-based discrimination persists, often exacerbated by local customs and traditions. Additionally, similar forms of social stratification and discrimination can be found in other cultures, such as the feudal system in medieval Europe or the racial segregation of apartheid-era South Africa. Globally, the caste system has become a symbol of the broader struggle against all forms of social inequality and discrimination. It serves as a stark reminder of the ways in which power and privilege can be used to oppress and marginalize others, and the long and difficult road to achieving true equality. The continuing fight. The fight against caste-based discrimination is far from over. Across India and the world, activists, scholars, and ordinary people continue to challenge the injustices of the caste system. From grassroots movements in rural villages to legal battles in the highest courts, the struggle for caste equality is being waged on multiple fronts. Education remains a crucial battleground in this fight. Access to quality education for Dalits and other marginalized communities is seen as a key factor in breaking the cycle of poverty and discrimination. Affirmative action policies, such as reservations in government jobs and educational institutions, have been implemented to address historical injustices and provide opportunities for those who have been systematically excluded. Voices of change. In recent years, a new generation of Dalit leaders and activists has emerged, using social media and other platforms to amplify their voices and demand change. These young leaders are challenging the traditional narratives of caste and asserting their right to dignity, equality, and justice. Cultural expressions, such as literature, art, and music, have also become powerful tools in the fight against caste discrimination. Dalit literature, in particular, has gained prominence as a way to tell the stories of those who have been silenced for centuries. These works not only document the experiences of Dalits, but also offer a vision of a more just and equitable society. Unraveling Japan's untouchability system and its enduring impact. The origins of Japan's untouchability system. The roots of Japan's untouchability system can be traced back to the feudal era, a time when society was rigidly stratified into classes. At the top were the samurai, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. But below these recognized classes were those considered outcasts, communities engaged in occupations deemed impure or tainted. These included leatherworkers, butchers, executioners, and undertakers, whose work involved death or the handling of animal carcasses. The belief in the impurity of these professions was deeply intertwined with Japan's religious and cultural beliefs. Shintoism, with its emphasis on purity and cleanliness, and Buddhism, with its notions of karma and pollution, reinforced the idea that those who worked with death or in unclean occupations were spiritually tainted. As a result, these communities were marginalized and forced to live in segregated areas, often on the outskirts of towns and cities, in hamlets known as buraku. The formalization of discrimination during the Edo period. The Edo period, 1603–1868, marked the formalization of this untouchability system. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan was governed by a strict social order designed to maintain peace and stability. The shogunate codified the status of the burakumin, reinforcing their exclusion from mainstream society. They were subjected to various forms of discrimination, including restrictions on where they could live, the types of clothing they could wear, and the jobs they could perform. During this time, the term eta, meaning abundant filth, was used to describe the burakumin. Another term, hainin, meaning non-human, was applied to those engaged in criminal activities or those considered socially deviant. Both terms reflected the deep-seated prejudice against these communities, which were treated as subhuman and denied basic rights and privileges enjoyed by other citizens. The burakumin were also subject to various humiliating practices designed to reinforce their inferior status. They were required to wear distinctive clothing and carry identifying documents, and they were often forced to bow or kneel in the presence of higher status individuals. Their children were denied access to education, and intermarriage between burakumin and non-burakumin was strictly forbidden, ensuring the perpetuation of this social divide. The Meiji Restoration and the abolition of legal discrimination. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 brought significant changes to Japanese society as the country embarked on a path of modernization and westernization. The new Meiji government sought to dismantle the old feudal order and create a more unified and egalitarian nation. As part of this process, the government officially abolished the caste system in 1871, declaring all citizens equal under the law. The eta and hainin were given the status of haimin or commoners, and the use of discriminatory terms was officially banned. However, the abolition of legal discrimination did not lead to the immediate integration of the burakumin into mainstream society. The stigma associated with their historical status persisted, and they continued to face widespread social discrimination. Many burakumin found it difficult to secure employment, access education, or marry outside their community. Despite the legal changes, the deep-rooted prejudice against them remained. The struggle for burakumin rights in the 20th century. As Japan continued to modernize in the early 20th century, the burakumin began to organize and demand equal rights. The Buraku Liberation League, BLL, originally founded as the Suihisha in 1922, became a central force in advocating for the rights of burakumin. The League called for an end to discrimination, the recognition of burakumin history and culture, and equal access to education, employment, and housing. The burakumin rights movement faced significant opposition from both the government and the broader society. Many non-burakumin viewed the movement with suspicion or hostility, fearing that the recognition of burakumin rights would upset the social order. The government, too, was reluctant to acknowledge the existence of ongoing discrimination, preferring to promote the image of a homogeneous and harmonious society. Despite these challenges, the burakumin rights movement made significant strides, particularly in the post-World War II era. The new Japanese constitution, adopted in 1947, enshrined the principles of equality and human rights, providing a legal framework for challenging discrimination. The Buraku Liberation League and other activist groups used these legal tools to push for reforms, and by the 1960s, the government began implementing policies aimed at improving the living conditions of burakumin communities. The ongoing impact of discrimination. Despite these efforts, the legacy of the untouchability system continues to affect the lives of many burakumin today. Social discrimination persists, particularly in areas such as marriage, employment, and education. In some cases, Burakumin are still segregated into certain neighborhoods, and there are reports of employers refusing to hire individuals from Burakumin backgrounds. One of the most enduring forms of discrimination is related to marriage. In many parts of Japan, it is still considered taboo for non-Burakumin to marry someone from a Burakumin background. Families often conduct background checks on potential spouses to ensure that they do not have Burakumin ancestry. If such a connection is found, marriage proposals are frequently rejected, leading to social ostracism for those who defy these norms. In the workplace, Burakumin often face subtle forms of discrimination, such as being passed over for promotions or being assigned to menial tasks. There have also been reports of employers using background checks to screen out Burakumin applicants, despite such practices being illegal. Government and social responses to Burakumin issues. Over the years, the Japanese government has implemented various measures aimed at addressing the discrimination faced by the Burakumin. In the 1960s and 1970s, the government introduced the Dawa policy, which provided financial assistance to improve the living conditions in Burakumin communities. This policy led to the construction of new housing, schools and community centers, and helped to raise the standard of living for many Burakumin families. In addition to these material improvements, the government also sought to promote awareness of Burakumin issues and reduce social prejudice through education and public campaigns. Textbooks were revised to include information about the history of discrimination against Burakumin, and schools were encouraged to teach tolerance and respect for diversity. The role of activism and advocacy in the 21st century. In the 21st century, Burakumin activism continues to play a crucial role in challenging discrimination and promoting equality. The Buraku Liberation League remains a central force in advocating for the rights of Burakumin, working to address issues such as discrimination in marriage, employment, and education. The League also seeks to preserve and promote Burakumin culture and history, ensuring that the struggles and contributions of Burakumin are recognized and remembered. In recent years, Burakumin activists have increasingly turned to the internet and social media as tools for raising awareness and mobilizing support. Online platforms have provided new opportunities for Burakumin voices to be heard, allowing activists to connect with broader audiences and challenge stereotypes and prejudices. International human rights organizations have also taken an interest in the plight of the Burakumin, highlighting their struggle as part of the global fight against discrimination. Reports by organizations such as Amnesty International and the United Nations have brought international attention to the ongoing challenges faced by Burakumin communities and have put pressure on the Japanese government to take further action. The intersection of Burakumin issues with other social movements. The struggle for Burakumin rights intersects with other social movements in Japan, particularly those related to minority rights, gender equality, and labor rights. The experiences of the Burakumin highlight the broader challenges of addressing social inequality and discrimination in a society that often prides itself on its homogeneity. Chapter 10. The Global Perspective, comparing Japan's untouchability system with other societies. Japan's untouchability system is not unique. Similar systems of social exclusion have existed in other parts of the world. One of the most well-known examples is the caste system in India, where the Dalits, formerly known as untouchables, have faced similar forms of discrimination based on their occupations and social status. There are also parallels with the treatment of marginalized communities in other societies, such as the Roma in Europe, and the descendants of slaves in certain African and Middle Eastern countries. These comparisons provide valuable insights into the ways in which social hierarchies are constructed and maintained, as well as the challenges of dismantling them. The future of Burakumin, identity and social equality. As Japan continues to grapple with the legacy of its untouchability system, the future of Burakumin identity and social equality remains uncertain. While there have been significant strides in reducing discrimination and improving the lives of Burakumin, the challenges of social integration and acceptance persist. The Burakumin community continues to navigate the tension between preserving their unique cultural identity and achieving full integration into mainstream society. This process is complicated by the lingering prejudices that still exist, as well as by the broader social and economic challenges facing Japan. Looking ahead, the key to achieving true equality for the Burakumin lies in a combination of legal protections, social activism, and cultural expression. By continuing to challenge discrimination and promote understanding, the Burakumin can help to build a more just and inclusive society for future generations. Healing the wounds of the past, the story of Japan's untouchability system is a testament to the resilience and strength of the Burakumin people. Despite centuries of discrimination and exclusion, they have maintained their cultural heritage, fought for their rights, and contributed to the rich tapestry of Japanese society. As Japan moves forward, it must confront the legacy of its past and work to heal the wounds that continue to affect its people. The journey towards equality and justice is ongoing, but with continued effort and commitment, it is possible to overcome the divisions of the past and build a brighter future for all. Chapter 10: A World Without Caste. The dream of a world without caste may seem distant, but it is a vision that continues to inspire and drive change. The dismantling of the caste system will require not just legal and political reforms, but also a fundamental shift in social attitudes and cultural values. This shift begins with education and awareness. It requires challenging the deep-seated prejudices and stereotypes that underpin caste-based discrimination. It involves promoting a culture of equality, where individuals are valued for their character and contributions rather than their caste or social status. Epilogue: The road ahead. The caste system, with its long and painful history, remains one of the most significant challenges to achieving social justice and equality in the world today. But the story of the caste system is also one of resilience, resistance, and hope. It is the story of countless individuals and communities who have refused to be defined by their caste and have fought for their right to live with dignity and respect. As we look to the future, the lessons of the caste system remind us of the importance of fighting against all forms of discrimination and injustice. They challenge us to build a world where everyone, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to thrive and fulfill their potential. The road ahead is long and difficult, but it is a journey worth taking, a journey towards a world where the chains of caste are finally broken and the dream of equality becomes a reality for all.